Hazel Coleman's heart stuttered as Jackson Reed, her boss and owner of Reed Enterprises, leaned closer across the candlelit table. The exclusive rooftop restaurant overlooking Manhattan twinkled with city lights that reflected in his steely blue eyes. His voice dropped to a whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "Pretend you're my wife tonight," he said, his confident tone leaving no room for argument. "Just for this dinner. But I have only one rule that you must follow, and it's non-negotiable." Hazel's mouth went dry. 3 hours ago, she'd been hunched over spreadsheets in her cubicle, preparing for tomorrow's board presentation. Now she sat in a designer dress Jackson had somehow procured in her exact size, wearing jewelry worth more than her annual salary, across from New York's most eligible bachelor, a man worth billions who rarely took no for an answer. "I don't understand," Hazel said, fidgeting with the unfamiliar weight of the diamond bracelet on her wrist. "Your wife?" "Mr. Reed, I'm your financial analyst, not an actress." His expression remained unreadable as he sipped his whiskey. "My grandfather's business partners are arriving in 5 minutes. They're old-fashioned Japanese businessmen who believe family enterprises should be run by family men. I've been trying to secure this deal for 2 years." He leaned forward. "If they think I'm a devoted husband, it'll seal the partnership worth hundreds of millions." Hazel took a deep breath. At 28, she'd spent 6 years climbing the corporate ladder at Reed Enterprises, determined to prove herself in a male-dominated field. Jackson Reed barely knew she existed, until today when her supervisor fell ill, thrusting her into the spotlight for the quarterly report presentation. "And the rule?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Something flickered in Jackson's eyes. "The rule is simple, don't fall in love with me." A surprised laugh escaped her. "That won't be a problem, Mr. Reed." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Good. Because I've seen what happens when people confuse business with pleasure. It always ends badly." He glanced toward the entrance. "They're here. From this moment on, you're Hazel Reed, my devoted wife of 2 years. We met when you consulted on a project for my company, a whirlwind romance. Very private ceremony in the Maldives." Before Hazel could process the absurdity of the situation, Jackson was standing, greeting 3 distinguished Japanese businessmen. His hand found the small of her back, guiding her forward. His touch was firm, possessive, a perfect act for their audience. "Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet my wife, Hazel." The evening blurred into a haze of polite conversation, exquisite food, and the constant warmth of Jackson beside her. He played his role flawlessly, the attentive husband, occasionally touching her hand, sharing private smiles, telling the story of their fictional first date with such vivid detail that Hazel almost believed it herself. Most surprising was how easily Hazel slipped into her role. Perhaps it was her business degree, or perhaps it was the way Jackson looked at her, as if she truly mattered. Whatever it was, by dessert, she found herself leaning into his shoulder, laughing genuinely at his jokes and feeling a dangerous warmth spreading through her chest whenever their eyes met. The Japanese businessman seemed thoroughly charmed, especially Mr. Tanaka, the eldest of the group, who raised his glass in a toast to partnerships, both business and personal. May they both flourish with trust and loyalty. After dinner, the businessmen departed, leaving Hazel and Jackson alone on the rooftop. The act should have ended there, but Jackson's hand remained on hers, his thumb tracing idle patterns across her skin. "That went better than I could have hoped," he said quietly. "You were remarkable, Hazel." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly awkward now that their audience was gone. "I should go. It's late, and I have the board presentation tomorrow." Jackson nodded, but made no move to release her hand. "About that presentation, I'd like you to lead it. Your work on the quarterly report impressed me. You see patterns others miss." Hazel blinked in surprise. "That's my supervisor's responsibility. He'll be back tomorrow." "I'm making it your responsibility," Jackson said firmly. "I recognize talent when I see it." The car ride to her apartment was silent, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. When they arrived, Jackson walked her to the door of her modest building, a stark contrast to his penthouse lifestyle. "Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. sharp, my office to prepare for the board," he said. Then, unexpectedly, he leaned down and brushed his lips against her cheek, a performance for no audience. "Good night, Mrs. Reed." Hazel watched him walk away, her cheek burning where his lips had touched. The rule echoed in her mind. Don't fall in love with me. It wasn't until she was inside her apartment that she discovered the envelope in her purse. Inside was a bonus check with more zeros than she'd ever seen, along with a handwritten note: "For services rendered, the jewelry is yours to keep as well. J.R." The warm feeling that had been building all evening crystallized into ice. Of course. To Jackson Reed, everything and everyone had a price tag. This was a business transaction, nothing more. Hazel tossed the check onto her coffee table and sank onto her sofa. She should feel grateful for the opportunity, the bonus, the chance to advance her career. Instead, she felt hollow. What Hazel didn't know was that across town, in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, Jackson Reed stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, whiskey in hand, unable to shake the image of his pretend wife from his mind. The rule he'd given her was one he'd always lived by himself, a rule born from the painful lessons of his past, a rule he was suddenly finding difficult to remember. The next morning, Hazel arrived at Reed Enterprises headquarters at precisely 7:45 a.m., power suit on, hair perfectly styled, the diamond bracelet conspicuously absent from her wrist. She'd left all the jewelry in a box on her kitchen counter, a silent statement that some things weren't for sale. As the elevator climbed to the executive floor, her stomach knotted with nerves. Last night had been a fantasy, a strange, unsettling masquerade. Today was reality, and in reality, she was just Hazel Coleman, financial analyst, who had a job to do and a career to build. Nothing more. The elevator doors opened directly into Jackson Reed's private reception area, and Hazel froze. Standing there, in deep conversation with Jackson, was Mr. Tanaka from dinner last night. Both men turned at her arrival. "Ah, here she is now," Jackson said, smiling broadly. "My brilliant wife." Hazel's carefully constructed professional mask slipped. The fantasy wasn't over. It was just beginning. Mr. Tanaka bowed slightly. "Mrs. Reed, a pleasure to see you again. I was just telling your husband how impressed I was with your knowledge of international markets last night." Hazel shot Jackson a panicked look, but his expression remained calm, confident, as if he'd expected this complication all along. "Mr. Tanaka has invited us to dinner at his estate this weekend," Jackson explained smoothly, "along with several potential investors." Hazel began, but Jackson cut her off with a gentle touch to her arm. "My wife is simply concerned about her schedule," he said to Mr. Tanaka. "She's leading a very important board presentation today." Mr. Tanaka nodded approvingly. "A modern marriage. Two powerful professionals supporting each other. I admire this greatly." After he departed, Hazel pulled Jackson into his office, shutting the door firmly behind them. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "The dinner was supposed to be the end of it." Jackson moved to his desk, completely unruffled. "Plans change. The Tanaka Group is considering a $500 million investment, and they're clearly more comfortable dealing with a family man." He looked up, his expression serious. "This could be the biggest deal in the company's history. And what about my career? My reputation? People will talk if they think I'm sleeping my way to the top." "No one will think that," Jackson countered. "You were already on the promotion track before this. Your work speaks for itself." Hazel paced the expansive office, mind racing. How long would this charade need to continue? "Just until the contracts are signed. 2 weeks, maximum." Jackson's voice softened. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, Hazel." She stopped pacing, weighing her options. The professional opportunity was undeniable, leading the board presentation today, access to the upper echelons of the business world, connections that took others decades to build. And despite everything, a tiny, traitorous part of her had enjoyed last night, being Jackson Reed's wife, even if just pretend. "Fine," she finally said. 2 weeks, but we need ground rules beyond just your 'don't fall in love with me' command." She ticked off points on her fingers. 1, my work comes first. 2, no more surprise kisses. 3, I want a promotion, real one, not just playing dress-up for investors. A slow smile spread across Jackson's face, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "You're negotiating with me? Bold move, Coleman. Is that a yes or no, Mr. Reed?" He extended his hand. "Deal." As they shook hands, neither of them noticed Jackson's assistant standing in the doorway, eyes wide, having heard enough to form all the wrong conclusions. By lunchtime, whispers had spread throughout Reed Enterprises. The Ice King had secretly married a junior analyst from finance. The truth was far more complicated and dangerous than office gossip could imagine, because despite their agreement, the rule was already beginning to crack. By Friday afternoon, Hazel's life had transformed into an elaborate performance she barely recognized. Her board presentation had been a resounding success, earning her admiring glances from executives who'd previously overlooked her. The office whispers followed her everywhere, a mixture of envy and speculation. The story of her secret marriage to Jackson Reed had spread like wildfire, despite HR's attempts to quell the gossip. "You have visitors, Mrs. Reed," Jackson's executive assistant, Pamela, announced with thinly veiled disapproval. 3 days into their charade, and Pamela still hadn't warmed to Hazel. Hazel looked up from the financial projections on her new office computer. Her promotion had come with a corner office on the executive floor, conveniently close to Jackson's suite. "I don't have any meetings scheduled," she replied, glancing at her calendar. "They're not on your schedule," Pamela's lips pursed. "It's your parents." Hazel's blood ran cold. Her parents? The door opened before she could respond, revealing her mother's beaming face and her father's bewildered expression. "Surprise!" Barbara Coleman rushed forward, enveloping Hazel in a cloud of floral perfume and questions. "Why didn't you tell us you got married? And to Jackson Reed, of all people. We had to find out from Betty Miller, who saw it in some society column online." "Mom, Dad, I can explain," Hazel began, but her father cut her off. "Your mother insisted on coming immediately. Packed us up and drove straight from Connecticut." Thomas Coleman looked around the plush office. "Executive financial strategist? Last month you were just an analyst." Hazel's mind raced. Her parents lived only 2 hours away in Hartford, where her father taught economics at the university, and her mother ran a successful interior design business. They were pragmatic people who valued honesty above all else. This deception would crush them. "I was going to call you this weekend," she improvised, desperately searching for a way out. "It all happened so fast." Barbara clasped her hands together. "A whirlwind romance, just like in the movies." The office door opened again, and Jackson appeared, his timing impeccably awful. He froze momentarily upon seeing Hazel's parents, then smoothly transitioned into the role of doting husband. "You must be Barbara and Thomas," he said warmly, stepping forward to shake hands. "Hazel speaks of you constantly. I'm sorry we haven't met until now." Barbara practically glowed. "The apology is ours. We should have invited you to dinner ages ago, but Hazel never mentioned she was dating her boss." "I like to keep my personal life private," Hazel said weakly. "Understandable," Jackson agreed, placing his arm around her waist with practiced ease. "We wanted to enjoy our newlywed bubble before making announcements." Thomas narrowed his eyes, his professor's gaze scrutinizing. "Pretty unusual to keep a marriage secret from your own parents." An uncomfortable silence fell. Hazel could feel her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. "Actually," Jackson said, his voice taking on an unexpected vulnerability, "that was my fault. My last relationship ended, painfully, when the media attention became too intense. I wanted to protect Hazel from that scrutiny for as long as possible." The sincerity in his voice surprised Hazel. She knew Jackson's engagement to socialite Victoria Huntington had ended badly 3 years ago, but he never discussed it. His pain seemed genuine. Thomas's expression softened slightly. "I suppose I can understand that. The media can be vultures." "Why don't we all have dinner tonight?" Barbara suggested brightly. "We're staying at the Plaza. We could celebrate properly." Hazel shot Jackson a panicked look, but he was already agreeing enthusiastically. "We'd be delighted." 7 o'clock? After her parents left, Hazel collapsed into her chair. "This is spiraling out of control." Jackson perched on the edge of her desk. "It's one dinner. They seem lovely." "They are lovely," Hazel snapped, "which is why I hate lying to them. And what happens when our marriage conveniently ends after your business deal?" A shadow crossed Jackson's face. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it." He stood to leave, then hesitated. "By the way, the story about Victoria was true. The press hounded her until she fled to Europe." Hazel's anger deflated slightly. "I'm sorry, that must have been difficult." "Ancient history," he said dismissively, but something in his eyes told a different story. "Wear the blue dress tonight. It matches your eyes." Dinner with her parents proved surprisingly enjoyable. Jackson charmed them effortlessly, sharing stories of his humble beginnings in Seattle before building Reed Enterprises from scratch. Hazel had never heard these details before. His father's death when Jackson was 16, working 3 jobs to support his mother through her illness, building his first tech startup from a garage. "You never told me any of this," Hazel said quietly, while her parents were distracted by dessert menus. Jackson's eyes met hers. "You never asked." Something shifted between them in that moment, a glimpse behind the billionaire facade to the self-made man beneath. Hazel found herself genuinely laughing at his jokes, leaning into his touch without thinking. The lines between pretense and reality blurred dangerously. "Well," Barbara declared as they finished their coffee, "I can see why you fell for him, Hazel. Though I'm still hurt you didn't include us in your wedding." Guilt twisted in Hazel's stomach. "It was very small, Mom." "We're planning a proper reception," Jackson interjected smoothly. "Once the Tanaka deal is finalized, you'll be our guests of honor." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "The Tanaka deal, the Japanese investment group." Hazel had forgotten her father's extensive knowledge of international economics. "Yes, Jackson's been working on it for months." "Interesting timing," Thomas mused. "I read they only partner with family-run businesses." A heavy silence fell over the table. Jackson's hand tightened around Hazel's under the tablecloth. "Dad," Hazel began, but Thomas waved her off. "I'm not implying anything," he said, though his expression suggested otherwise. "Business is business, and speaking of which, we should let you two get home. I'm sure you have an early morning tomorrow." Outside the restaurant, Barbara hugged Hazel tightly. "He's wonderful, darling. A bit intense, perhaps, but he looks at you like you're the most precious thing in his world." Hazel's throat tightened. "Does he?" "A mother notices these things." Barbara patted her cheek. "Just be careful with your heart, sweetheart. Men with empires sometimes struggle to make room for love." In the car back to Jackson's penthouse, where Hazel had reluctantly agreed to stay temporarily to maintain appearances, silence stretched between them. "Your father suspects," Jackson finally said. "He's an economist. He connects dots for a living." Hazel stared out the window at the passing city lights. "This is getting too complicated, Jackson. The contracts will be signed next Friday. Then everything can go back to normal." Normal, the word echoed hollowly. What was normal now? Before this charade began, Hazel had been satisfied with her methodical climb up the corporate ladder. Now she'd tasted life in the upper echelons of power, not just professionally but personally. Being desired even artificially by a man like Jackson Reed had awakened something in her she hadn't known existed. "There's a charity gala tomorrow night," Jackson said as they entered his penthouse. "The Tanakas will be there along with several other potential investors." Hazel nodded wearily. "What time?" "Car will pick us up at 7. He hesitated. "Hazel, I know this isn't what you signed up for. If you want out—" "I signed a deal," she interrupted. "I'll see it through." Later that night, unable to sleep in the lavish guest suite, Hazel wandered to the penthouse's kitchen for tea. She was surprised to find Jackson there, wearing only pajama pants, staring at his laptop screen. "Sorry," she said, turning to leave. "Stay," he said softly. "I could use the company." Against her better judgment, Hazel sat beside him at the counter. "Trouble sleeping?" "Always." He rubbed his eyes. "I was looking at the presentation for the Tanakas. Something feels off about their financing structure." Hazel peered at the screen. Financial analysis was her specialty, and despite her complicated feelings about this arrangement, her professional instincts kicked in. "May I?" For the next hour, they worked side by side, discovering discrepancies in the Tanaka Group's reported assets versus their actual holdings. Jackson's proximity was distracting, the scent of his skin, the warmth radiating from his bare chest, but Hazel forced herself to focus. "This doesn't make sense," she murmured, pointing to a series of offshore transactions. "They're moving money through shell companies, but why?" Jackson frowned. Could they be hiding financial problems? Or something else entirely? Hazel's mind raced through possibilities. "We need more information." They locked eyes, the thrill of the challenge pulsing between them. In that moment, they weren't pretend spouses or boss and employee. They were equals, partners. "We'll get it," Jackson promised, his hand covering hers. "Together." The touch lingered longer than necessary. Hazel knew she should pull away, but instead found herself leaning closer, drawn by a magnetic pull she couldn't explain. Jackson's eyes darkened as his gaze dropped to her lips. The shrill ring of his phone shattered the moment. Jackson answered gruffly, his expression shifting to concern as he listened. "I'll be right there," he said, standing abruptly. "That was security. There's been a break-in at the office, specifically targeting the files on the Tanaka deal." Hazel felt a chill. "Coincidence?" "I don't believe in coincidences." Jackson was already heading for his bedroom to change. "Stay here. I'll handle this." "No," Hazel said firmly. "If we're partners in this, then we're partners all the way." Jackson paused, studying her with an unreadable expression. Then he nodded once. "Get dressed, 5 minutes." Neither of them could have predicted what awaited them at Reed Enterprises, or how it would test not just their false marriage, but their very real, growing feelings for each other. The Reed Enterprises headquarters loomed like a ghost ship in the midnight darkness, emergency lights casting eerie shadows across the normally bustling lobby. Security personnel swarmed the executive floor, where Jackson's office door hung ajar, the sophisticated lock system disabled. "Nothing appears to be missing, Mr. Reed," the head of security reported, as Jackson and Hazel surveyed the chaos. "But someone definitely accessed your computer system." Hazel noticed Jackson's jaw tighten. "Show me the security footage." The video revealed a hooded figure moving with practiced efficiency through the office, using high-level access codes to enter restricted areas. Most disturbing was how familiar they seemed with the building's layout and security protocols. "It's an inside job," Hazel whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. They knew exactly where to go and how to get in. Jackson's expression hardened into something dangerous. "I want a list of everyone with executive access, and I want the Tanaka files secured in an offline location immediately." As the security team dispersed to follow his orders, Jackson pulled Hazel into an empty conference room, closing the door behind them. "This changes everything," he said, his voice low and urgent. "If someone's targeting the Tanaka deal, it could be corporate espionage, or worse." "You think the Tanakas are behind this?" Hazel asked, mind racing through the financial discrepancies they'd discovered earlier. Jackson ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I don't know, but I can't ignore the timing. First we find irregularities in their finances, and hours later someone breaks in targeting those specific files. We need more information before jumping to conclusions," Hazel cautioned, her analytical mind taking over. "Let's look at who benefits if the deal falls through." They spent the remainder of the night in a secure room, creating a complex web of competing interests and rival companies. By dawn, they had narrowed the list of potential suspects to 3. Venture Tech, Reed Enterprises' main competitor, Harold Winters, a board member who had vocally opposed international expansion, and the Tanakas themselves, whose financial maneuvers suggested potential desperation beneath their veneer of prosperity. Exhausted, Hazel leaned back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. "What do we do now?" "We continue as planned," Jackson decided after a moment's thought. "The charity gala tonight is our chance to observe the Tanakas up close, maybe get some answers. If they're involved, they might reveal something under pressure. And if they're innocent," his eyes met hers, "then we're still in danger because someone else is trying to sabotage this deal." They returned to Jackson's penthouse as the city awakened, both too wired to sleep despite their exhaustion. Hazel showered and changed into fresh clothes. Her wardrobe had mysteriously expanded to fill a section of Jackson's guest closet, while Jackson made urgent calls to increase security. When she emerged, she found him on the balcony, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. The morning light softened his usually sharp features, revealing the weight of responsibility he carried. "You never stop, do you?" she asked, joining him at the railing. He glanced at her, a wry smile touching his lips. "Can't afford to. Even billionaires need rest, especially billionaires." His expression turned serious. "The more you build, the more you have to lose." Something in his tone made Hazel pause. "Is that why you created your rule? Don't fall in love with me?" The question hung between them, more intimate than she'd intended. Jackson's gaze returned to the skyline. "My father died when I was 16. Heart attack, right in the middle of a board meeting. He'd built a modest construction company, worked himself to death for it." Jackson's voice was distant, as if reciting someone else's story. "My mother fell apart. Their love was all-consuming. When he died, part of her died too." "I'm sorry," Hazel said softly. I swore I'd never be that vulnerable, never give anyone that kind of power over me. He turned to face her fully. Then Victoria happened. Your ex-fiancée? Jackson nodded. She was brilliant, ambitious. I thought we understood each other, that she loved me for who I was, not what I owned. Then the tabloids printed photos of her with her ex-boyfriend just weeks before our wedding. Hazel winced. That's awful. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was realizing how close I'd come to breaking my own rule. His eyes locked with hers, intense and unguarded. I won't make that mistake again. Before Hazel could respond, Jackson's phone rang. He checked the screen, his expression shifting back to business mode. It's Mr. Tanaka, I should take this. Hazel retreated inside, her mind spinning. For the first time, she glimpsed the man behind the billionaire facade, wounded, guarded, and far more complex than she'd imagined. The rule that had seemed so arrogant now revealed itself as armor, protecting a heart that had been broken too many times. And despite her best intentions, Hazel Coleman was starting to care. Hours later, as they prepared for the charity gala, an uncomfortable tension lingered between them. Jackson had been distant since their morning conversation, burying himself in work, while Hazel coordinated with security to discreetly investigate the break-in. You look beautiful, Jackson said as Hazel emerged from the guest room in a shimmering silver gown. Thank you. She smoothed the fabric nervously. What's our plan for tonight? Mr. Tanaka seemed genuinely concerned about the break-in when I spoke with him. Either he's an excellent actor, or he's not involved. Jackson adjusted his bow tie. His son, Kenji, will be attending tonight. He's been overseeing their international investments, including our deal. I'll see what I can learn from him, Hazel offered. People tend to underestimate women in evening gowns. Jackson's lips curved into a genuine smile. Not if they have any sense. The charity gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The historic building transformed into a glittering wonderland of champagne fountains and ice sculptures. New York's elite mingled beneath priceless artworks, their jewelry rivaling the exhibits in splendor. Hazel felt eyes on them the moment they entered, Jackson's hand possessively at the small of her back. Being Mrs. Reed meant being the focus of attention, some curious, some envious, some calculating. Jackson, there you are, called a silver-haired man Hazel recognized as Harold Winters, the board member who opposed the Tanaka deal. And this must be the bride we've all heard about. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he kissed Hazel's hand. Quite the whirlwind romance, from what I hear. When you know, you know, Jackson replied smoothly, drawing Hazel closer. Indeed. Winter's gaze sharpened. I was surprised to hear about the office break-in. Anything missing? Nothing important, Jackson lied. Just a random incident. Curious timing with the Tanaka contracts nearly ready. Winters swirled his champagne. Speaking of which, I hear there are some irregularities in their financing. Hazel felt Jackson tense beside her. How could Winters know about the discrepancies they'd only discovered last night? Everything's proceeding as planned, Jackson replied neutrally. If you'll excuse us, I see the Tanakas have arrived. As they moved away, Hazel whispered, he knows about the financial issues, which means either he's behind the break-in or our security has more leaks than I thought. Jackson's expression was grim. Stay close tonight. I don't trust anyone here. Kenji Tanaka proved surprisingly forthcoming after several glasses of champagne. Younger than his father, with Western education and perfect English, he spoke candidly about their family business. Father is traditional, but I've been pushing for modernization, he confided to Hazel, while Jackson was momentarily detained by investors. This deal with Reed Enterprises is crucial for our future. Why is that? Hazel asked innocently, sipping her champagne. Kenji hesitated, then leaned closer. Between us, we're facing pressure from competitors in Tokyo. Without Western expansion, we could lose significant market share. That sounds serious. It is. But your husband's company offers exactly what we need, technology innovation coupled with financial stability. He studied her with newfound interest. Father was impressed by your financial acumen at dinner. Perhaps you could review some proposals I've developed. I'd be happy to, Hazel replied, seeing an opportunity. When were you thinking? Tomorrow morning? I could bring them to your office. Before Hazel could respond, a commotion erupted across the ballroom. She turned to see Jackson confronting a striking blonde woman, their body language tense and hostile. "Ah, Victoria Huntington," Kenji observed. "Your husband's ex. This should be interesting." Hazel's stomach dropped as she recognized the woman from tabloid photos, tall, aristocratic, with the confidence of old money. Jackson's former fiancée had returned to New York. Making her excuses to Kenji, Hazel moved quickly to Jackson's side, arriving in time to hear Victoria's cultured voice dripping with disdain. "Marriage? Really, Jackson? We both know you're incapable of actual commitment." Jackson's face was a mask of controlled fury. "What are you doing back in New York, Victoria?" "Business," she replied vaguely, her gaze shifting to Hazel. "And this must be the lucky bride, enjoying your time as Mrs. Reed? However long it lasts." "Indefinitely," Hazel replied with more confidence than she felt, slipping her arm through Jackson's. "I'm Hazel." "Charming." Victoria's smile was arctic. "Did he tell you about us, Hazel? About how he chose his precious company over me? How he buried himself in work rather than face his feelings?" Jackson's jaw tightened. "You chose someone else, Victoria. Let's not rewrite history." "Because you were never there." Victoria's composure cracked momentarily. "I was alone, Jackson. Always alone." Something flickered in Jackson's eyes. Pain, regret? Hazel couldn't be sure. Then his walls slammed back into place. "That's ancient history. If you'll excuse us, my wife and I have guests to attend to." He guided Hazel away, his grip on her waist almost painful. "Are you okay?" she asked once they were alone in a quiet alcove. "Fine," he said curtly, but his eyes were stormy. "I didn't expect her here." "She still has feelings for you," Hazel observed, surprised by the twinge of jealousy the realization provoked. Jackson laughed bitterly. "Victoria has feelings for what I represent. Power, wealth, status. She never loved me." "I'm not so sure," Hazel said softly. "People hurt the ones they love when they feel neglected." His eyes snapped to hers. "Whose side are you on?" "Yours," she replied simply. "Always yours." Something shifted in his expression, vulnerability replacing anger for a fleeting moment. Then his phone buzzed, breaking the spell. He checked the screen, his face paling. "What is it?" Hazel asked, instantly alert. "Security at the penthouse. There's been another break-in." His voice was tight with controlled panic. "They're sending images now." He turned his phone to show Hazel the security footage. The intruder wore the same hooded disguise as before, but this time they'd left something behind. Spread across Jackson's bed were dozens of photographs of Hazel at her apartment, at the office, even at dinner with her parents. Across the images, a message was spelled out in cut-out letters. "The marriage is fake. The danger is real." "We need to leave. Now," Jackson said, already guiding Hazel toward the exit. "Jackson, wait. Who would do this? How do they know about our arrangement?" His expression was grimmer than she'd ever seen it. "I don't know. But they're not just after the Tanaka deal anymore. They're after you." As they rushed toward the exit, neither noticed Victoria watching them intently from across the room, phone in hand, a calculating smile playing on her perfect lips. The safe house was a luxury apartment in Brooklyn Heights, unmarked, unregistered, and unknown to anyone but Jackson and his most trusted security team. As dawn broke over the Manhattan skyline, visible through bulletproof windows, Hazel paced the living room, anxiety coursing through her veins. "I should call my parents," she said, breaking the tense silence. "They'll worry if they see anything on the news." Jackson looked up from his laptop, eyes shadowed from a sleepless night. "Use this," he said, handing her a secure phone. "No more than 2 minutes. Don't tell them where we are." The conversation with her mother was brief and carefully worded. Yes, she was safe. No, she couldn't explain right now. Yes, Jackson was taking care of everything. When she hung up, Hazel found Jackson watching her intently. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You protected me," he said quietly. "You could have told them everything, that our marriage is a sham, that I've put you in danger, but you didn't." Hazel hadn't considered betraying him, not even for a moment. The realization unsettled her. "We're in this together now," she said simply. His expression softened. "We need to talk about what happens next. My security team found surveillance equipment in both the office and the penthouse. Professional grade. Whoever's behind this has been watching us for days." Hazel sank onto the couch beside him, the implications making her dizzy. So they know everything about the fake marriage, the Tanaka deal, and they're using it against us. Jackson ran a hand through his disheveled hair. The question is, who stands to gain the most from sabotaging both the deal and my reputation? We have 3 suspects, Hazel said, slipping into analyst mode to calm her nerves. Harold Winters, who opposes the deal and knew about the financial irregularities. Venture Tech, your biggest competitor, and now Victoria, who has both motive and opportunity. Don't forget the Tanakas themselves, Jackson added grimly. The discrepancies in their financials could indicate desperation. Perhaps they're planning to take Reed Enterprises' intellectual property and run. Hazel shook her head. That doesn't explain the photos of me or the warning. This feels personal. Everything in business is personal, Jackson said with unexpected bitterness. Especially revenge. A notification pinged on his laptop. Jackson's expression darkened as he read the screen. The break-ins have leaked to the press. The New York Times is running a story suggesting corporate espionage related to the Tanaka deal. He scrolled further, his face paling, and page 6 has photos of us fleeing the gala, with speculation about trouble in paradise for New York's most secretive power couple. Hazel's stomach churned. This is spiraling out of control. I'm ending it, Jackson said decisively, closing his laptop. I'm calling off the Tanaka deal. What? Hazel stared at him in disbelief. You can't. You've worked on this for 2 years. It's not worth your safety. His voice was steel, his decision clearly made. I'll issue a statement citing security concerns, protect our intellectual property, and take the financial hit. The intensity of his gaze made Hazel's heart stutter. This wasn't the calculating businessman speaking. This was a man protecting someone he cared about. The realization hit her like a physical blow. You'd sacrifice the deal for me. Something vulnerable flashed in Jackson's eyes. Some things matter more than business, Hazel. The air between them crackled with unspoken emotion. Hazel found herself leaning toward him, drawn by a force beyond rational thought. Jackson's hand came up to cradle her face, his touch feather-light, questioning. The shrill ring of the secure phone shattered the moment. Jackson answered, his expression quickly shifting to confusion, then alarm. When? He demanded, standing abruptly. Send everything to my secure server. He hung up, turning to Hazel with renewed urgency. That was my head of cybersecurity. They've traced the surveillance equipment purchases to a shell company registered to Harold Winters. Winters? Hazel's mind raced. The board member who opposed the Tanaka deal? And who's been trying to force me out for years? Jackson was already typing furiously on his laptop. He's been accumulating Reed Enterprises stock through dummy corporations. If the Tanaka deal fails and our stock plummets, he could stage a takeover, Hazel finished, the pieces clicking into place. But why target me specifically? Jackson's expression darkened. Because you're my perceived weakness. Winters has always believed emotions cloud business judgment. He looked up, a dangerous gleam in his eyes. He's about to learn how wrong he is. For the next hour, they worked side by side, Hazel's financial expertise complementing Jackson's strategic mind, as they developed a counter-move that would protect both the company and themselves. Their plan was daring, requiring perfect timing and complete trust, neither of which seemed in short supply between them anymore. There's just one problem, Hazel said as they finalized the details. This plan depends on our marriage being real, at least legally. Otherwise, the stockholder protections won't apply. Jackson's gaze met hers, steady and certain. Then let's make it real. Hazel's heart stopped. What? Not permanently, he clarified quickly. Just legally, temporarily. Enough to enact the stockholder protection clauses and outmaneuver Winters. Oh! The disappointment that washed through her was irrational, unwanted but undeniable. Of course. Jackson studied her face, something unreadable in his expression. Unless. The word hung between them, charged with possibilities neither dared voice. Before Hazel could respond, Jackson's phone rang again, Kenji Tanaka requesting an urgent meeting. Despite the risk, they agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a private room in a high-security hotel where Jackson kept a permanent reservation for delicate negotiations. Kenji arrived alone, visibly agitated. My father doesn't know I'm here, he said without preamble, but I discovered something you need to see. He produced a tablet containing internal communications from the Tanaka group, specifically exchanges between his father and Harold Winters, dating back months. Winters approached my father last year, suggesting a partnership, Kenji explained as Jackson and Hazel read through the messages. When father chose Reed Enterprises instead, Winters became desperate. The communications revealed Winters' increasingly frantic attempts to sabotage the deal, culminating in a thinly veiled threat. Reed's new wife could prove a valuable source of information, willingly or otherwise. Hazel felt sick. He was planning to use me against Jackson all along. When I found these, I knew I had to warn you, Kenji said earnestly. My father values honor in business. He would never condone such tactics. Jackson's expression was thunderous. Does your father know about our marriage situation? Kenji looked uncomfortable. He suspected it was convenient timing. But he was impressed by both of you, regardless. Your commitment to each other during the deal negotiations convinced him of your integrity. The irony wasn't lost on Hazel. Their fake relationship, built on deception, had paradoxically demonstrated their character. What will you do? Kenji asked. Jackson exchanged a look with Hazel, silent communication passing between them. Spring our trap, he said simply. The emergency board meeting was called for that afternoon. Harold Winters arrived looking smugly confident, clearly expecting Jackson's downfall. Instead, he found himself facing not only Jackson and Hazel, but also the elder Mr. Tanaka, who had flown in specifically for the occasion. Before we begin, Jackson addressed the assembled board members, his voice commanding absolute attention. I'd like to introduce my wife, Hazel Reed, who as of this morning is also Reed Enterprises' new chief financial officer. Murmurs rippled through the room. Winters' expression soured. As Mrs. Reed has uncovered evidence of corporate espionage targeting our company, she'll lead this portion of the meeting, Jackson continued, yielding the floor to Hazel with unmistakable pride. Heart pounding but voice steady, Hazel presented the evidence they'd gathered. The surveillance equipment traced to Winters' shell company, the communications with the Tanaka group, the calculated stock accumulation through dummy corporations. With each damning slide, Winters' face grew paler. You have no proof, he finally sputtered when she finished. Actually, we do, Jackson countered, nodding to security personnel who entered with 2 police officers. The NYPD's Financial Crimes Division has been building a case against you for months. We just provided the missing pieces. As Winters was escorted out, shouting threats and accusations, Mr. Tanaka approached Jackson and Hazel. His weathered face creased in a smile that reached his wise eyes. Most impressive, he said with a slight bow. You work together as true partners should. Thank you, Mr. Tanaka, Hazel replied, surprised when Jackson's arm slipped around her waist. No audience required the gesture now. I look forward to finalizing our partnership tomorrow, Mr. Tanaka continued. A union between our companies built on mutual respect, just as your marriage clearly is. Guilt twisted in Hazel's stomach. The deception had served its purpose, but the lies left a bitter taste. As soon as they were alone in Jackson's office, she voiced her discomfort. We need to tell him the truth, she insisted. The deal can stand on its own merits now. Jackson studied her for a long moment. And what truth would that be exactly? That we're not really married, that it was all business? Was it? His voice softened as he stepped closer. Just business. Hazel's heart pounded as he took her hands in his. Jackson, my rule was stupid, he said quietly. Her defense mechanism born of fear. Because the truth is, Hazel Coleman, I've been falling for you since you stood in my office, arguing for a promotion while accepting a fake marriage proposal. A startled laugh escaped her. That's not very romantic. I'm not a romantic man, he admitted. I'm demanding and difficult and married to my work. But these past 2 weeks have shown me what could be possible with the right partner. His eyes held hers, vulnerable and honest in a way she'd never seen before. If you'll have me. What about your rule? She whispered, hardly daring to believe this was real. A smile touched his lips. Some rules are meant to be broken. When he kissed her, it wasn't for show, wasn't part of any pretense or business arrangement. It was real, tender and passionate and full of promise. 6 months later, Hazel stood on the balcony of their Maldives villa, watching the sunset paint the ocean in fiery hues. The Tanaka deal had transformed Reed Enterprises, and under Hazel's financial leadership, the company had expanded into new markets with unprecedented success. But more importantly, she and Jackson had built something neither had believed possible, a partnership of equals in business and in life. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Reed," Jackson asked, joining her at the railing. Hazel smiled at the gold band on her finger, a symbol of their real wedding 3 months ago, intimate and genuine with her parents beaming in the front row. "I was just thinking about your rule," she teased, turning in his arms. "Don't fall in love with me." "Worst rule ever," he murmured against her lips. Completely unenforceable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Hazel reflected on the strange, twisted path that had led them here, a pretend marriage that had revealed their true selves, a business arrangement that had opened their hearts, and a simple rule meant to protect that had ultimately been the key to their happiness when broken. Some risks, Hazel had learned, were absolutely worth taking.